So I was easily available to, able to go into something I was familiar with, massage the data, and then get it imported back into JMP. And I think the second section, Rick's going to show you what we did pretty easy. We were able to set it up in roles and get it so that we could start doing some analytics on it. And a couple things I want to just point out, because they're going to come back throughout the presentation, is what he's got highlighted right now, subject. You'll see different numbers, 2005, I think it goes to like 2017 or something. These are the different people that were involved. They just labeled them a 2000 sequence. So if you see that change, it's basically a different person that was going through that study. And then as we go down, some of these other come back into, but some of the most important one is channel there, where you see the RR1, RR4, different channels. These are the different little probes that Rick showed in that picture. So you could picture there, I think there's 138 of them to start off with. So 138 different channels. And then the readout, the actual electrical readout that they got in different scenarios, which is what they're calling mean density.
And so after we got it, we kind of cleaned it up. We got this file. We did kind of our first basic analysis that you might do when you get some data. So the first thing we did is we went in and we looked at the different distributions, right? That's kind of one of the first things you'll do. And so things we might be interested in, the eyes, mean density is a big one. We got some additional information. All these are the different tests that were run, so the figure 8 thing and all the different ones. These are all different tests, all the torture these poor people have to go through. They all end up in these scores, these aggregate scores. So I'm going to pick these. I'm going to pick the last one's actually kind of an aggregate of the aggregates, but I'm going to leave that out for now. And then we got some demographic information. So we got their sex, and let's pick age, and just because it's interesting, is there anything interesting? Are you currently taking any psychoactive drugs? Let's see what's on. So the way JMP works is, for the uninitiated, it always kind of bothers me, but in this case it's actually kind of a good thing. It puts all the graphs sideways. So turn your head if you need to. I can change it, and I would change it, but if I changed it, you couldn't see the cool thing that when you select one thing in JMP, it highlights the other. When I make it horizontal, everything ends up off the screen. So I'm going to leave them kind of vertical, like whatever direction they are, sideways right now. Just to show you. So I mentioned when your eyes are open and when they're closed, you can see this mean density, the different EEG readings. So they're a little bit higher when your eyes are closed than when they're open. So you can kind of see how it's different in the distributions there. So what we're really interested in is, so these scores over here, is there a correlation? So I'm going to pick kind of the highest scores, and I'm just going to visually look at the mean density, see if there, does it happen a bunch at the top or at the bottom, and it really doesn't look like it does, unfortunately, because that would have been nice. We would have been done real early, but that's not how it works in life ever. So check the other one, kind of the same thing. You see it's kind of just bunched around the middle, so there's no obvious, simple correlation, and you have to trust me on the last one. You can look at sex, so females, there's how you guys tend to score. I'll let you draw your own conclusions on that. And the males, again, feel free to come up with your own thing. Something kind of interesting, you look at age. Pick everybody underneath 40. Let's scroll over to my scores here. Tend to score pretty good. That's great. What that tells us is these tests are a lot like video games in a lot of cases, and it turns out the younger people are good at that. Unfortunately, that's not what the study was about. So we don't know. And then the psychoactive drugs, turns out there were no yes answers, but I just thought it was an interesting question. What's that? Yeah, that's right. If they were on them, maybe they didn't even know. So that was kind of the first thing we did. The second thing you can do, I won't go through all the menu items. There's a multivariate analysis you can do. And what that basically does is it compares all the continuous data against all the other continuous data. And it gives you this handy dandy chart. I mean, this is just beautiful. This is really obvious what's going on. What it does do, and it's a little hard to see on the screen, it actually colors the numbers between kind of a blue and a red. So if it's highly positively correlated, it's going to be a dark blue. And you see all these things, mean density versus mean density is going to be 1 because it's against itself. And then like this negative 0.79 is highly negatively correlated. Still kind of hard to see the numbers, so we added these ellipses. And what you're looking for are ellipses and not big circles like what you see on almost all of these. We got kind of excited down in the lower right-hand portion of this, somewhere around here. Started seeing these guys, and we're like, awesome, we found something. But it turns out all these things are related. They're calculations off of each other. They're interrelated, highly explainable, not part of anything that was actually good. So kind of struck out here as well. So we said, all right, jump. How about partitioning, which is a lot like decision tree analysis. And so actually I'm going to do this too, because I think for this, go to partition. And so we are going to want partition. Well, you know what, let me go back to your let me run this and I'll show you. And so here we have a partition for mean density. So this is the EEG ratings. And I'm going to click this button. And Don, you can help me out here in a little bit. I'm going to click split. And what it's going to do, what this says is for everything has an aggregate score for this thing greater than or equal to 59.09. Their mean density tends to be around negative 0.09. And if it's less than that, then your mean density is higher, right? And so it goes through all the data and kind of picks the most logical break and groups them into two most logical groups that it can. Yeah. Yes.
So this partition tree is called classification and regression trees. In this case, because y is a continuous variable, so it's a regression tree. So what it does is actually it pick on different combinations of those predictor variables in that they partition the parameter space. In the subspace they actually have a mean, like a constant model for that subspace, but they use different combination of those predictor variables to partition the space into smaller space, and then you will have a constant predictor value for each subspace.
So Rick, a good layman's example would be if you want to predict somebody's weight, you can take their age and their height and their sex, etc. And it looks at all of those variables and it sweeps through them and looks for the best split amongst all of the variables, and it says amongst all of these variables and all of the possible places to split them, which one best explains weight? And it might say, well, the best explainer is the variable sex, male and female is the best explainer, including all of the other variables, which were height and shoe size, whatever else you have in there. So it's a good first cut at your data to say, what is really affecting my output here based on all of these inputs?
You know, I won't dive too deep into the partitioning part, but what I'll do is just split it a few times, and you can kind of see a little bit what he's talking about, although these are kind of weird terms. He's looking at these scores and then splitting them into different groups. You can see the difference in mean between this group and this group, and over, I didn't go that far. And then went down here is the next best split, next best explainable kind of grouping, if you will. And and there's kind of a picture of it up here. One number I want you to do pay attention to is this R squared number. It's 0.278. I've split it a few times. I can split as many times as I want. And it'll kind of get better and better, but at some point you're overfitting. And even in this model, not a very good R square. At least not something we were happy about. Not something that was very easily explainable to a customer too. So at this point, we kind of went through our 3 basic analysis, and in some respects, we didn't throw our hands up in the air, but it was time to regroup and say, okay, we got to kind of start thinking about this a little bit differently.
So yeah, about this point, time's coming, we're getting closer to this presentation at the conference, and we haven't found our smoking gun yet. So we kind of scratched our heads a little bit and said, okay, let's try and take advantage of some of Jump's graphical features, see if we can see anything a little more graphical with some of its plotting capabilities. And basically what we had to do is we went back to our customer, our client, and said, hey, you know, you got these things modeled in the helmet, and do you have any data that tells us where they're at? We know all the channels. They said, oh yeah, we have ordinate data. So send us the ordinate data and let's see what we could do with it. Jump has this cool feature called 3D scatter plots, where it could use things in 3 dimensions, and that's kind of the ordinate data that we had. And Rick will show you have an X, a Y, and a Z ordinate that corresponds to every one of those channels. So he's going to do a little bit of formatting to get this ready. And one thing that Jump does is based on what kind of data point it has, and I grouped them into subgroups so that it wouldn't be so granular. But he's tying a color to each one of the groups, and he's saying if you're in this group, be this color, and if you're in another group, be another color. And see, what he did real quick was he assigned a color to each one of those groups, and you can see it down the column. So any report, any kind of graphic that we do from here on out, it'll understand that color, and it can make that number, instead of just being a number, an actual representation with color. It can be analyzed that way. So with that, we go into our scatterplot 3D functionality, and it gave us this, which is